Welcome back to another edition of the BrownZone.com Zone Coverage Podcast. A new season is upon us, and we've got an actual game to discuss here in just a couple of days. Andy Barch with AM 930 WEOL and 100.3 FM. Joined as always by Scott Petrak, the Browns beat reporter with the Chronicle, Telegram, the Medina Gazette, and of course at BrownZone.com. Well, Scott, we're recording this on a Thursday, so technically, in the NFL sense, it is a game day, but the Browns, of course, won't play until Sunday, and the moment is finally here, and I'm not sure that many of us thought that we'd get to this point.
Well, that's exactly right, Bo, and I was asking some of the players about that today. Were your doubts, did you have doubts in March, April, May, June, July even, right? Did you have doubts about a season, and then what are your emotions now? And some of the guys said, yeah, sure, I didn't know if there was going to be a season, and I think there's a general feeling of excitement and eagerness, maybe a little some anxiousness. We talked to J.C. Treader, the center, on Wednesday. We know he's the president of the NFL Players Association. And he said, yeah, it's good that we got here, but we can't let our guard down, right? And there's kind of a message to everyone involved with the NFL, players, coaches, staff, that you got to continue to do the right things, right? This virus has not gone away. I think everybody's been on their best behavior during training camp. Now you get into the regular season. There's more free time for players. It might sound weird to people, but there is. There's more free time for players. There's more recovery time for your body. And you have to be smart. And you can't go out like you normally would. And you can't go sit in a crowded restaurant like you normally would. So it'll be interesting to see how the NFL deals with it. I think Major League Baseball has had success recently since we had those huge outbreaks early in the season. But you're right. We have a game night tonight. We're going to have a full slate of games on Sunday. And, I think for football fans, and I know for football coaches and players, they're just excited to be back on the field.
And I think fans all across the U.S. of A. are very excited that football is back as well. Well, today we'll get into a host of different topics, and, we'll certainly come around to your NFL predictions and also a prediction for Sunday as well. But I want to begin with a question that's kind of been on my mind for a little while. And I know that you guys put together a real nice Browns section today in the Chronicle Telegram. We encourage all of you tuning into the podcast to pick this up. It's a real nice piece previewing the Browns position by position, examining game by game. It also includes Scott's NFL predictions as well in there. A great article I think you should all check out. But I want to begin at the head coaching position here, and I'm curious as to how much more confidence you have in Kevin Stefanski than maybe you had with Freddie Kitchens. And I know that's a question that has a lot of different layers to it, but a lot of people seem to be very, very confident in what they have heard and seen so far from Stefanski.
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't know, right? We don't know how he's going to handle life as a head coach. We don't even know if he's going to call the plays, right? He keeps kind of kicking that down the road and saying, yeah, I'll announce it before the game. I don't know if that's going to be Friday. I don't know if that's going to be Sunday morning. But he's never been a head coach before, so that's a huge unknown. And maybe you're right. Well, maybe this is hindsight because we know how it turned out with Freddie Kitchens. But I know personally, and I think we might have talked about it last year before the season started, I had serious questions about whether Freddie could handle being an NFL coach, being an NFL head coach. And my two issues for last year's team were, does Baker improve on his rookie season, which he did not, and how does Freddie do? And he didn't do well enough. And that's why I think those two things are the reason they went 6-10. Now you can throw in, the whole team didn't handle expectations. Yes, but that starts with the coach. And I think the coach let him down. And obviously the Haslams agreed because they fired him after one season. So I think Kevin Stefanski would have to be really bad to be worse than Freddie Kitchens. And it's not just that. I don't want to just set the bar at, okay, Freddie Kitchens is here. Is Stefanski going to do better? Do the Browns fans have reason to believe that Stefanski is the answer? And I'm going to say yes, and it starts with his intelligence. The guy is extremely smart. Ivy League education, not that means you're extremely smart, but I think you get the impression that he is. We talk to him every day just about, and communicates well, handles himself well. And to me, he answered a lot of questions in this unprecedented offseason. And not every coach is built for that. Not every, obviously as a Browns beat writer, I've seen a lot of head coaches pass through here. And not everyone is built to handle unique circumstances, difficult circumstances, changing scenarios. And we all lived it, right? This offseason, these last 6 months changed on a daily basis, it felt like. And I thought Stefanski did a good job handling all those unknowns, handling all the curveballs, like he likes to say. He figured out how to run the offseason on Zoom. He figured out how to monitor player workouts, figured out a way to build some kind of camaraderie among a young team and a team that didn't even know its coaching staff, didn't get in front of its coaching staff until the end of July. So I think those are all good signs about Stefanski. Now, he still needs to prove himself as a play caller. He's only done it for like 19 games. He still needs to prove that when they lose games, and they will lose games, can he keep the team together? How does he handle that? But I think fans have the right to expect much better from Kitchens, or much better from Stefanski than they had from Kitchens.
This will be an interesting question to revisit because you're right. Based on everything that you just mentioned, dealing with a totally different set of circumstances. And I think it's safe to say, too, a different set of expectations because of the letdown that last season was. That's a question I think we'll certainly revisit a little bit later on in the year, but the expectations are certainly different for Stefanski than they were for Freddie Kitchens. Now, we all know that he's going to put a much stronger emphasis on the running game, and that brings us to our news of the week, and that's that Kareem Hunt was, of course, given a contract extension. Scott, what are we to make of this extension for Kareem Hunt, and what do you think that could mean for a potential Nick Chubb extension?
It's interesting, Bull, and I'm working on kind of an analysis about this situation. And, I don't know if I'm going to get it finished because there's a bunch of other stuff going on, but I'd like to because I do think this is a really important topic. I think it tells us, number one, that the organization trusts Kareem Hunt at some level, and a pretty high level. And that's significant given his background. Right? We all know the suspension last year. He had the traffic stop in January that kind of threw things up in the air. The Browns feel he's doing the right things. If not, you don't say we're going to give this guy $8.5 million guaranteed. Now I'm sure there's clauses that if he violates, he doesn't get the money. But the point is you don't commit to a guy publicly if you have serious doubts. So I think that's one thing. Then for me, it's okay. So they committed to Kareem Hunt through 2022. Nick Chubb's rookie deal runs through 2021, but they can start to negotiate an extension, and he can sign one after this season, so next offseason. Do you pay? I mean, we're talking Nick Chubb is probably going to get $15 million a year ballpark, right? Christian McCaffrey with Carolina signed a deal that pays him $16 million a year. I think Derrick Henry came in at 14. You wait another year, you expect numbers to go up. So let's just even ballpark it at $15 million. Can you pay both your running backs a total of $21 million? That's a lot. And I think it's a ton for a team that's built around analytics when the running back position has been devalued. And you feel like you can go draft a guy that can come in and maybe not play at the same level as your previous starter, but close, and you're paying him way less than that guy's going to be paid. So I think the Browns organization will have a difficult decision to make when they can start negotiating with Nick Chubb after the year. And what makes it difficult is, I think in the abstract, they would say we're not paying a running back $15 million a year. But Nick Chubb, in reality, was the team's best player a year ago, might be its hardest worker, gets raves from coaches and teammates for his selflessness. And I think it sends a bad message to say, yeah, we're not going to pay that guy. Now, I suppose you could let his rookie contract run out and franchise him and keep him that way without committing long-term dollars. I think that's a road the Browns could go down. But it's something you wonder about, and I'm sure it's something that Andrew Berry, the GM, and Paul DePodesta, the chief strategy officer, are spending a lot of time thinking about how they're going to handle that. And then in the immediacy, it's, all right, well, if you have Nick Chubb and you have Kareem Hunt, are you going to run the ball 35 times a game, 40 times a game in 2020 in the NFL, where I think 3 teams ran the ball more than they threw it a year ago? And one of them was Kevin Stefanski's Vikings offense. But you have Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry and Austin Hooper, all of whom are making a bunch of money. You drafted Baker Mayfield number 1 overall. So I think there's a lot to kind of balance here. And maybe Kareem's extension shouldn't shift how I'm thinking about this, but the timing of it, the amount of it, not that it's, it doesn't put him over the salary cap or anything, but that's significant money to pay a guy who conceivably might only play 12 snaps a game, 15 snaps a game. So I don't know. I would expect Kareem Hunt's role to be bigger than the Browns are letting on, whether that means as a slot receiver, whether that means Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in the backfield together, like we saw some last year. But it makes me wonder about a lot of things this year and down the road.
Going to be fascinating, as you said, to see how that works out. And that brings us to a couple of interesting questions. Predictions for not only the NFL, but also this Sunday as the Browns take on the Ravens. Scott, we'll start with the Browns-Ravens game on Sunday. What are some of your key components for this matchup? I guess what units do you really think really need to stand out for the Browns to pull off an upset victory?
Well, I'll start with a couple of areas I'm worried about, Bull, and it's the linebackers on defense, right? We've talked about it a bunch of times. And then they go and lose Mack Wilson to a knee injury for at least the first couple of weeks. So you're going to see B.J. Goodson, Sione Takitaki, Jacob Phillips, who's a rookie, right? Goodson has never been an every down player, and now he's going to be. So he means he needs to cover. Not only do the linebackers need to stop the run game of the Ravens, which is a big-time run game, right? Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram. They add J.K. Dobbins. You got to cover tight ends. Mark Andrews, Baker Mayfield's buddy from Oklahoma, is a big-time target at tight end. The Ravens stress the middle of the field, and that's where your linebacker. So Goodson has to prove he can cover, which he's never really shown in his career. Sione Takitaki started one game last year, is more of a thumper than a cover guy. He's going to have to prove he can cover. Jacob Phillips is a rookie, and I don't think he was asked to cover. I know he wasn't asked to cover a bunch at LSU. So I have doubts there. Now, maybe the Browns covered some. They go three safeties in a dime package, but then you're susceptible to, the double tight end packages that the Ravens like to run. So linebacker's a question mark for me. And then left tackle Jedrick Wills. How does he hold up? He'll probably face Calais Campbell a good amount, who the Ravens got in the offseason. I think they traded for him. A veteran, big-time player. How does Wills hold up? How do the Browns have to help him out with chips and sliding the protection? So there's the two areas I would worry about. I think that the Browns are going to have a chance. You can't have Lamar Jackson, can't have a huge game, right? And the Browns did a pretty good job in that first battle last year when they went into Baltimore and stunned them, keeping Lamar Jackson in check. If you can win the turnover battle, right, that's obviously huge when you're the underdog. And then you have to control the ball on the ground with those two running backs like we talked about, but then have explosive chunk plays in the passing game. And that's how Stefanski's offense is supposed to operate, but you just have to make it work against a really good Ravens defense. So if you can get, if Nick Chubb can have a good day, and then you mix in the big throws to Odell, the big throws to Landry, the big throws to Hooper, I think you're going to have to score a good amount of points, right, to keep up in this game, because I don't think the Browns are going to shut down that Ravens attack. But it's definitely a tough matchup, especially for new coach who didn't have a normal offseason.
Well, that brings us around to your season prediction, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything here. It was in that entire Browns section today that you expect the Browns to go 8-8, and I know last year you had high expectations of them going 10-6. Now there's also an expanded playoff field this year. So before we dive into your NFL predictions, let's focus on the Browns for just a moment and that 8-8 record that you laid out in the Chronicle Telegram today.
Yeah, Bull. It was tough. I settled on 8-8, and I kind of admitted in the column that I felt a little scarred from last year because I went 10-6 last year, and I thought I was being conservative. We had people going 12-4, and you had all kinds of expectations for this Browns team, and I thought I was kind of reining it in at 10-6, and obviously they go 6-10. So I do not want to get carried away this year, but I do think 8-8 is not only realistic. I think it's fair to expect a team to go 8-8. They have a ton of talent. And I can't get past that. And it's not only the offensive playmakers that we've talked about. Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson, Larry Ogunjobi on the D-line, Denzel Ward at corner, Greedy Williams when he comes back. There's a lot of pieces there. I think we spend a lot of time focusing on kind of maybe the negatives and, okay, well, they're weak here, and I think that's just the nature of the business. But there's a bunch of talent on this team, and they should be able to score a bunch of points, which means they should be able to be in a number of games. And the schedule's not that hard. So I think 8-8 qualifies as obviously an improvement over 6-10. I think it would be a good start for Kevin Stefanski. But it is lower than I had started out with. If you had asked me in, March 1st, even before free agency, any of that, I would have thought, yeah, you know what? I think this team takes a step forward, a big step forward, and maybe 9-7 is possible, maybe even 10-6, even given the real tough division of the AFC North with the Ravens, who are 14-2, Steelers with Big Ben coming back. But I've kind of tempered it given the unusual offseason. And I think it's just asking a lot for Kevin Stefanski, the first-time head coach, with no preseason, no real offseason program, to come in and have this team clicking on all cylinders early. So I think so that's why I lowered the prediction to 8-8. And I think it's really important for the Browns to steal a couple wins early. Cincinnati in week 2 is winnable. Washington in week 3 is winnable. And kind of just keep their heads afloat. And then if that happens and they can stay around 500 into October, November, December, then they'll be in the playoff discussion, and then we'll see how they do. So if they're not in that discussion when we get to November, December, then I think it's a disappointment and a letdown, and they underachieve.
Well, that leads us into your NFL predictions. I think 8-8 seems pretty safe, all things considered, with this team, especially coming off of a year where a lot of people looked at it as maybe 11-5 or 10-6 or bust, and we all know how that turned out. So I think tempering the expectations a little bit at the outset probably isn't a bad idea. Diving into your NFL predictions, and these are always extraordinarily tough because the NFL, especially over the last 15 years, it's been a difficult league to predict because it's one of the leagues that really is kind of centered around this whole idea that the worse you do during the regular season, well, the higher you pick in the draft, and you should be able to turn things around pretty quickly. It's not uncommon for a team to have a victory or two and then, of course, come back and make the playoffs the following season. So it makes the NFL very difficult to predict, but I'll let you tell the rest of the story as to what teams you think are going to the playoffs and eventually win the entire thing.
Sure. I went with the Ravens. I just think they're too loaded. I think they have too much talent. Lamar Jackson's too good. Now, if you get an injury to Lamar Jackson, that changes everything. I went with the Bills to end New England's run. I still think New England's going to be good, but I think the Bills take a step forward. The Patriots take a step back. Maybe it takes a while for Cam Newton to feel comfortable in that offense. And they had a bunch of guys on defense opt out, so I'm a little worried about the Patriots. I went with the Colts in an AFC South, which is loaded. It could be the Texans or the Titans. I went Colts. Chiefs, to me, is a no-brainer in the West. Wild cards, we got 3 this year, like you mentioned. I think the Steelers, assuming Big Ben's healthy, I think they go, 9-7, 10-6, whatever it takes. I think the Patriots get in, and I think the Texans get in. I think people would probably disagree with me thinking the Titans coming off the AFC Championship game, but I'm not ready to buy into Ryan Tannehill, and it feels like one of those teams that is always going to be around 8-8, and maybe they go 8-8 again and don't get into the playoffs this year. I think the Chiefs beat the Ravens to go to the Super Bowl. To me, those are the 2 teams that are above everyone else, and I think the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, I can't see picking against them at this stage. NFC, I like Vikings, Cowboys, Saints, Seahawks, and then wild cards, Buccaneers with Tom Brady, Packers, 49ers. I like the Seahawks. I think Russell Wilson's going to have a huge year. I think he's going to be MVP. Actually, take that back. I think he's going to be in the conversation. I still gave the MVP to Patrick Mahomes, but I think the Seahawks win the NFC, and then I think you see maybe the league's 2 best quarterbacks, Mahomes and Wilson, in the Super Bowl, and I just think it's really hard to win back-to-back Super Bowls. So I went Seahawks over Chiefs.
So take that to the bank. Seahawks, says Scott Petrak. So that is a guarantee. Go ahead and mark that one down. But we'll, for another minute or so here, go a little bit deeper on the Seahawks. What is it about the Seahawks that you like? You mentioned, Russell Wilson will be in the conversation for MVP, but what other elements of the Seahawks do you really like?
Well, I feel like they always have a strong defense. I think their system is just solid. They play a lot of that cover 3. Now, they've lost guys, right? They've had Earl Thomas left, and they had Richard Sherman left, but I feel like they've replaced some of those pieces. Now, the pass rush, I know they were thinking about bringing back Clowney, and he wound up going to Tennessee. they're going to have to figure out how they're going to need enough pass rush. But I really like Pete Carroll as coach. And I think Wilson is just so elite that he gives you a chance all the time. They run the ball really well. DK Metcalf, if he's as good as people think he can be, and there's great reports coming out of Seattle, I thought he had an impact as a rookie. If he takes that next step and you give Russell Wilson a huge target like that, in addition to the other weapons they have on offense, I just think there's a chance for them to be really good. And then, the Niners take a little bit of a step back just because, everybody, you say, oh, they were so good last year. This league is so hard to win year in and year out that it's not a knock on the 49ers. It's not a knock on the Chiefs if they don't win the Super Bowl. Even the Ravens if they go from 14-2 to 12-4. This league is hard. You get a bunch of injuries that can happen, and it changes kind of the direction of everything. But it just feels like the Seahawks they haven't been down, but they kind of been on the back burner last couple of years, and I think they get back to where they were when Russell was in his first and second year.
Well, we'll have to make sure we save this, and then we'll revisit this come February, assuming that COVID-19 is behind us, and it sounds like the NFL is doing a really nice job of that with the daily testing. I think that's certainly worked wonders, and let's hope that by the time we get to February, things are kind of back to normal. Scott, we'll finish up with the golf shot of the week. It's tougher and tougher to get out and golf these days, but I know you were able to go out last Friday. What shots stood out to you?
Yeah, you're telling me it's tougher and tougher. The NFL season is not good for my golf. I told my wife, I think it might have been Tuesday, I said, man, I miss golf. She's like, you played Friday. I'm like, I don't care. I still miss it. And I probably won't play again until Tuesday, or actually maybe Wednesday. The Browns have the short schedule next week because they play Thursday night. So I'm not sure what their practice schedule is. Anyway, so I was able to play Friday. Couldn't find a tee time anywhere. It wound up getting out at Hilliard Lakes in Westlake. And number 4, it's kind of a tough par 4. It's got a creek that runs across the middle. It's a little tightish as you get past the creek. And I hit a good drive down the left side, had a wedge in, I think it was a wedge, and I hit it to about 2 feet. It landed and stuck right there. It was probably a give me birdie. I wound up, I putted it anyway, but I just don't hit we talked about it. Well, I just don't hit a lot of irons that close. So to hit one and kick in range felt good, and I don't know. I can't remember if I made a birdie on the back or not, but it was nice to have. It was nice to get a birdie because obviously those help the score. I played pretty well on the front, and then it kind of went in the dumper after that.
The back 9 at Little Augusta can be pretty challenging, no question about that. Well, Scott, good stuff as always. Next week, we will have a game to recap and then a quick turnaround on Thursday with a game to preview as well between the Browns and Bengals. Always a pleasure, Scott. Have fun this weekend, and we'll catch up again next week.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott. Again, that's Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter with the Chronicle, Telegram, the Medina Gazette, and, of course, BrownsZone.com. That's going to wrap up another edition of the BrownsZone.com Zone Coverage Podcast. For Scott Petrak, this is Andy Barch saying thank you again for tuning in, and we will talk to all of you again next week.